This episode is brought to you in part by Barton Cane, revolutionizing gouged-shaped and profiled bassoon cane with precision, consistency, and love since 2012. Leave the cane processing to us. Free up time to practice, take a romantic dinner cruise, or cuddle on the couch with your cat on a rainy day and listen to Double Reed Dish. Enter coupon code Double Reed Dish rocks my world, no spaces, for free shipping on your next Barton Cane order. That's www.bartoncane.com.
Edmond Nielsen Woodwinds has been serving the double reed community for 70 years. Nielsen sells a wide variety of oboe, oboe d'amore, English horn, bassoon, and contrabassoon reeds and cane, as well as reed-making accessories, reed cases, and lafrex. And of course, they have the classic Nielsen wedge knife, which features a double hollow ground with a choice of handle size. In addition, they have many other knives available. Nielsen has long been known for their large Heckel bassoon bocal inventory. Fill out their online trial form to find the perfect Heckel bocal for you. For all your double reed accessory needs, Nielsen is ready to help you.
Hi, I'm Galit Kaunitz.
And I'm Jackie Wilson, and you're listening to Double Reed Dish,
a podcast for oboists,
bassoonists,
and the people who love them.
I was going to say happy Halloween, but when people are hearing this, it's actually November 1st. So I'm just now realizing we planned a Halloween-themed dish for the day after Halloween.
It's the hangover from spooky season.
There you go. I'll take it. It's like it's making up for Christmas creep, how people get mad that like Christmas stuff comes too early.
We're doing Halloween hangover.
Halloween hangover. There you go.
So what's creeping you out this Halloween?
Well, I don't know. I've just been getting it. Maybe it's because we're like still locked inside that I'm super excited to just kind of celebrate and the traditions. And Halloween is actually one that you can kind of still enjoy in the pandemic. Like you can't be trick-or-treating and handing out candy, touching hands and stuff, but we're going to put a bowl of candy out on our porch and just be like, honor system, take. So the first teenager who stumbles along
the whole bowl.
Is going to take the whole bowl. That's fine.
What have you and Buddy gone as in the past?
Well, last year was maybe my proudest moment. We went as Pink Lady and T-Bird from Grease and had matching jackets.
Does Buddy do well with the costumes?
He tolerates it for me. And so does my poor husband, who I don't even want to tell you what a mock leather jacket with having paid for the T-Bird copyright costs for a dog, but it was worth every penny. Let's put it that way.
You're like, this is a necessary expense. This goes in the need category in the budget. This is not a want.
Absolutely. And my Pink Lady jacket, I'm tempted to wear it 365 just to get that mojo. So do you have any Halloween plans this year?
No. I really want to just stay home and watch like some campy Halloween movies. Like I don't like actual horror, but I really like funny movies that are kind of in a spooky setting.
Like Death Becomes Her or something like that.
Yeah.
Chris and I are going to watch a movie about cults.
What movie is it?
I forget the name of it. Chris was like been wanting to watch it. It's fiction. It's not a documentary, but it's like this cult in somewhere in Scandinavia, like maybe Sweden. And I don't know. He made me watch the trailer and I was like, yeah, we can watch that on Halloween. So we're just going to put the candy out and also eat candy and watch a movie about cults.
That's awesome. Yeah, I anticipate some couch snuggles, some dog snuggles, and some movie time. it's still hot here, so it's really hard to get in the Halloween spirit when it's like 85 degrees outside.
Oh, and see here, there's snow on the ground, so like,
You skipped it.
yeah,
What happened
basically,
to fall?
all of the kids have to like put coats on over their fierce costumes that they're like so excited about.
That's how it was in Connecticut when I grew up. It
Yeah,
was like you
same.
had this great costume and then you just had a parka over it. So all you could see was like a sparkly skirt with like very thick tights.
Mm-hmm. Trick or treat.
Trick or treat.
So we have some Halloween themed questions that we asked our listeners here on this November 1st. What's our first question?
The first question was name a piece too spooky to listen to after dark.
I think mine would probably be like Atmospheres by Liggity. You know that
Mm,
piece? And it's like all the
I think
like
I've heard it
high.
before.
Kubrick used it in some of his movies, and
Mm.
it's all like high strings, like a microtone apart, and they're all like, and it's like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm being scared. I don't know. What
Wow.
about you?
Mine would probably be like anything that the Kronos Quartet ever recorded, and also and like that Threnody, what was it?
Serenity
Threnody
for the Victims of
for the
Hiroshima.
victims of Hiroshima, which, is kind of a very music history response, but it's scary.
It's the same type of the micropolyphony is the same type of thing that's in atmospheres. So we essentially have the same answer, just
Okay.
different pieces.
Okay,
No
fantastic.
micropolyphony. Scary.
So our listeners had some pretty fantastic responses to this. Lacrimosa from Mozart's Requiem from Emily Mendez,
That's
oboe.
very haunting. That's a good
Mhm.
one. Hyro says the Mozart oboe concerto, which is maybe the personal relationship that
It's so
they have to this
scary.
piece.
It's like bum, 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 ding, 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 ah!
The horror. The horror.
Eat, eat, eat.
Our second question. What's the longest you've played on a dead reed? So this was kind of like a zombie reed question.
Um, my favorite response is from Cara Wolf. She said, I once pulled out a 10-year English horn reed and played on that for band.
I think this is the winner.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I have to have commiserate with Amy Pollard, who said the entire pandemic, which yes, I basically played on the same reeds for since March.
Oh my God. One of my students wrote in and said a semester.
Busted.
I do not condone that response.
Blew the whistle on themselves.
They did. Okay, so the next question is what is the scariest piece to put on a recital?
Well, probably the Barrio Sequenza, having played it, that was pretty scary, not only in preparation, but also in execution. But I'm also kind of like a big high note baby. So maybe something with a high F, like Boutry or Dutilleux, which
Mhm.
makes me like lose sleep and cry. High notes. Meh. What about you?
Oh, the Poulenc Sonata, like times 1,000. That
Why? I
that
love that
piece is
piece.
so scary.
Is
It's
it hard for you guys?
so hard. The
Really?
second movement is so fast and hard, and the third movement, those pianissimo low B flats. It's so
Oh, I just
hard.
think about the first movement, which I love and is so pretty. So our listener said, oh, Emily said the Strauss Concerto, which I'm not an oboist, but even I know that's a pretty scary piece.
Mhm,
You got to grow a third lung to
mhm.
get that on there.
Or just buy an oxygen tank, either one.
There you go.
Sean Carson says, obviously the Mozart, but the Previn Sonata is pretty spooky too.
I have not played that yet, and it's on my list, so maybe I'll delay that a little bit. Abby says Tonsman Sonatine, and I have to agree that the last measure, actually, that's a super fun piece to play. And then the last measure, it's like you win it all or you lose it all. It's the last thing anyone remembers. You could nail the rest, and then it's just like, oh, the high E didn't come out. Oh, thanks. Cool. It's a rude measure. It's offensive. I don't like it.
So our last question is, if you could cast a spell on your instrument, what would it be?
Mine, which no one else came up with, and I am a little shocked, is it would practice itself.
Yeah.
So it'd be like those player pianos, but it would be a player bassoon. And I just hold it.
With ghost hands, like ghost fingers.
Wow,
Ghost
look at
thumbs.
How does she do it?
How does she do it?
Can women have it all? If you're self-practicing bassoon, the answer is yes. What about you?
Oh, for me, it would be just the most gorgeous high E flat, just a stress-free high E flat. And I can't decide between that and like for my oboe to never crack no matter what temperature it is.
Oh, an oboe that lasts forever.
So I'm guessing like I probably just need to get like a composite oboe that's not all wood because that exists.
Oh, y'all who instruments wear out, I don't know how you do it. God bless. God bless. We got some amazing responses to this question. Sarah says, for my bassoon to clean my apartment, a little reversal of Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Ooh.
That would be nice, but let's hope it doesn't get like wet in the mop water. That could ruin your instrument.
Yeah. Emily says a spell that would allow me to always play in tune. I believe that's called long tones, Emily.
Oh, we got the spell. Melissa says she would make her oboe always stay in adjustment, which I understand is a very credible wish.
Anne Lemke says no water under pads ever, under any circumstances ever. Yes, please, and thank you.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Heather says, have the instrument learn all my scales for me.
Emily Mendez says to make any reed sound good.
That's a great spell.
Yeah.
That's a pretty darn good spell because then you don't have to like,
I feel like Dylan is shooting low here. To swab itself? The swabbing is not the hard part, Dylan.
It's true in terms of like the grand scheme of wishes or spells, I guess. Well, I hope everyone had an awesome Halloween and did the Monster Mash and ate all the candy and watched all the scary movies and stayed safe and healthy. Specializing in the finest assortment of oboes, clarinets, bassoons, and their accessories, RDG Woodwinds serves musicians around the world. Their employees are all professional musicians who have a deep knowledge of the products that they sell. RDG's repair shop has an international reputation with a combined 100 plus years of service among the 5 repair technicians. Plain and simple, RDG provides excellent products and fabulous customer service. Visit them at rdgwoodwinds.com. They look forward to working with you.
Chemical City Double Reeds is a full-service double reed shop specializing in the sale of instruments, cane, accessories, and sheet music. Double Reed Dish listeners can enjoy free shipping with code DRDISH. Visit them in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or online at www.chemicalcityreeds.com.
We are pleased as punch to welcome to Double Reed Dish Albie Micklich, professor of bassoon at Arizona State University.
Hello, I'm thrilled to be here.
We're delighted to have you. We start all of our interviews with asking you how you came to start your instrument. So can you tell us how you began playing the bassoon?
Sure. So I'm from a tiny rural town in Pennsylvania, and we only had band and chorus. And I have a sister who's 2 years older than me, and she started the flute in fifth grade. And I was just so jealous and upset that I couldn't start an instrument when she did. And so for 2 years, I couldn't wait to start an instrument. And so in fifth grade, I chose the saxophone. And I loved it. I loved band. I loved practicing. I loved the rehearsals. I loved everything about it, but I didn't like the saxophone. And I knew really from an early age that I wanted to do something with music. That was going to be my life. But I didn't have my voice. And so I tried all the other woodwind instruments, and now it's 10th grade, I'm 16, and my band director said, there's one more instrument, there's a bassoon, and I didn't even know what a bassoon was. And so it was my great epiphany in my life as he took me to the basement in the school, handed me this case, and I opened it up. And I fell in love with the bassoon before I even knew how to put it together or play it. And I was self-taught. I didn't even know how to read bass clef, but I just fell in love with the bassoon. And so it was love at first sight. It really was.
And so, will you talk us through deciding that you wanted to be a professional bassoonist and pursuing your educational training? Kind of walk us through that journey and how you made the decisions of which schools you wanted to audition for and ultimately pursue.
Yeah, so I thought I was going to be a high school band director. And so that was the path I was going to take. And again, I had no training, and I auditioned at one school. It was Indiana University of Pennsylvania, which was about 2.5 hours from my hometown. So that was a good distance for my family, my parents, and myself. And I went off to be a high school band director. And I loved it. I had an amazing undergrad teacher, Dr. David Borst, who gave me, I can't believe he accepted me because I was a disaster. Wrong fingerings. I think I probably was still playing on a fiber cane reed. But he accepted me, and I loved it. And cut to, 4.5 years later, I'm student teaching, and I thought, I don't think I can do this. I remember going to him, Dr. Bohr, saying, I don't think I can do this. Like, this is not the right career path. I don't know what I'm going to do. I was really stressing. And he said, you're going to audition to do your master's in performance. And he gave me a list of 5 schools and said, this is where you're going to audition. And, I didn't know how I stacked up with anybody. And I looked at this list, and I thought he was off his rocker. I thought he was crazy. So I went and auditioned. I thought, hey, I'll take a trip to New York City. What the heck? My parents said they would pay. And so I went off to Juilliard for my master's. And, I was doing a lot of freelance work in Pittsburgh at the time that I had auditioned. And I got home one night from a late gig, and there was a message on my phone answering machine saying, this is Joe Green, I think was his name, from the Juilliard School. Give us a call. And I was depressed. I thought, oh my gosh, they don't even send rejection letters. It's a rejection phone call. And so I didn't sleep all night. I was so depressed. And the next morning, I wasn't even going to call. And I called up and I said, this is Albie Micklich. I'm calling to talk to Joe Green. And they patched me through. And he knew who I was. He's like, oh, Albie. And he said, the bassoon faculty, they were happy with your audition. They really want you to come to Juilliard. And I was convinced my friends were playing a joke on me. Like, I really thought somebody has a New York City area code and they're playing a joke. And I'm like, really? I mean, I just did not believe it. So I went off to Juilliard. And I did a master's and a performance or artistic diploma at Juilliard. And I studied with David Carroll, who was incredible. I have a good story about that. And, while I was at Juilliard, it was just the most amazing experience, living in the city, the orchestra, freelancing. And the longer I was there, I just thought, I don't think the orchestral career is for me. Like, I couldn't see myself being happy 20 or 30 years in an orchestra. Just, I love programming and picking what I'm going to play and picking who I want to play with. And to me, that just wasn't there. So now I'm stressing again. What am I going to do? And as I was getting ready to leave New York City, after 3 years, my undergrad teacher, Dr. Boris, called and said, I'm taking a sabbatical. I'm going to be gone. I want you to fill in for me at my undergraduate, Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And I thought, oh, here's teaching again. But I took it. I didn't have a job. Of course, I'm going to take it. And within the first week of teaching, I knew this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I mean, I love teaching, and it's that level and experienced players, and we can't deal with the parents. And so I fell in love with teaching at the college level. And it ended up being a year position. And as I was finishing up, the director of the department called me into his office and said, seems like you like it. The students like you. What are your thoughts? And I said, this is what I want to do. And he said, it was the time, this was 1996. And so you still kind of had to have the doctorates. You didn't have to. It was that transition of, now it's almost required. Mm-hmm. And so he said, you should go right off and get your doctorate. And I never had aspirations of getting a doctorate. But I thought, this is what I want to do. I got to do it. So, internet was new. I was emailing teachers. I emailed Barry Steeves, who was teaching at Michigan State. And I just knew, I was like, this is the guy for me. And so I did my DMA at Michigan State with Barry Steeves. And my first semester, he was on sabbatical, and I filled in for him. And so I was the bassoon instructor my first semester. And again, it just reconfirmed that this is what I want to do. So that's how I got to where I am today.
I have a couple follow-ups before we continue on in your story. The first, that you describe yourself as being self-taught and having kind of those self-taught fingering. My first private lesson was my first week of undergrad, so I know the what the E flat probably looked like, and the yes. That type of stuff. And then just 4.5 short years later to enter into one of the most esteemed conservatories in the nation, I would anticipate that you had quite a high level of focus once you got into your undergraduate environment. I'd love to know kind of what that experience of flipping into that level of intensity was like.
Yeah, so at IUP, you couldn't double major. And so I basically was doing the performance degree as well. So I was taking extra lessons. I was playing in a lot of ensembles. And so in addition to all the coursework of music ed, I just immersed myself in bassoon. And my mom tells the story of when I was in high school that, they'd have to tell me to quit practicing. Like, your sister's in bed, your brother's in bed, quit practicing. And I love to practice. And so, I don't know, I just felt getting to IUP, I was meant to be there with musicians, and it was a whole new level at, Juilliard, being immersed in that. I'd never been around that energy and people that all they want to do, live, breathe, and die making music.
You mentioned you had a great story about David Carroll, and I'm a big fan of the original bubonic bassoon quartet. So I would love to hear about your experiences being a student of him.
Yeah, so I was doing freelancing in Pittsburgh, and in fact, Carnegie Mellon hired me to play in all of their ensembles. They needed a bassoon, so I was down at Carnegie Mellon a lot, and I thought, I need to study with Nancy Goris. I'm here, so I took a couple lessons with her, which I instantly just really admired her, and great player, and I still remember the few lessons I had with her, exactly what she said. I learned so much in such a short time. And I told her, where I was auditioning, and she said, if you get into Juilliard, you have to study with David Carroll. And I didn't know who anybody was. This is before internet. So, I knew who Judy LeClaire was because she was the only female. And so I get to the Juilliard audition. And again, I don't know who all these gentlemen are. And I play the Mozart concerto, and I do my cadenza, and this big tall man, who's Frank Morelli, pops up and is standing behind me and said, "Can you play that cadenza again?" And if you know Frank Morelli, and we all do, he's intimidating. In size and in grandeur. And so I thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing wrong? And so I played it again, and he's like, "Where did you get this?" And I said, "Well, my teacher just gave the cadenza, and I just, I doctored it up." And he said, "Can you send me this?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll send you it." And then I thought afterwards, like if this is a good cadenza, I'm not. Why am I going to give this away? So I never sent it to him. And so, and again, I didn't know who he was, but Nancy said I have to study with David Carroll, so I checked the box that I wanted to study with David Carroll. And years later, I was flying into Pittsburgh. I was flying home. My mom picked me up. David Carroll and his wife, Jeannie Backstresser, former principal flute of the New York Phil, they now moved to Pittsburgh. So they had me and my mom over for brunch. And they had beautiful gardens at their house. And David was showing my mom his gardens. And I was walking with Jeannie. And, I was told my whole life, don't eavesdrop. But I was eavesdropping. I was listening to David Carroll. And it really is the most touching story. And he was telling my mom, he said, for Albie's audition, in came this kid from IUP. We didn't know where that was. We were not very hopeful for this guy. And he said, he left the room and we all wanted him. Like everybody's like, oh my gosh, we want this kid. And he goes, and I looked down and he checked my name and wanted to study with me. And he said to my mom, he goes, and I just felt so lucky that I got to teach this kid. And I just get goosebumps by that, because here I'm this little schmuck from nowhere, Pennsylvania, and just, like knowing that, he was excited about that. So that's kind of my Juilliard story.
That is incredible. That makes me want to cry. I love that so much.
Yeah, I'm so glad I heard that story. I really am. And I have pictures in my office right behind me of that brunch that we had, of him and Jeannie. So it was a very nice time.
It's those moments that live with you forever. And
Mm-hmm.
you may not know when they're coming and you may not know when you're in one, but they're
Yeah.
really important.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like from the very beginning, you were intrinsically motivated student bassoonist and you loved to practice. And, as teachers, we have experiences with students who are intrinsically motivated and externally motivated. And I wonder if your perspective has affected the way that you teach. Do you find that motivation, that inner motivation, is contagious and that your students take it on too? Or do you find that you have to reach elsewhere to motivate some of the other ones too?
Yeah, there's definitely both of that. And, when I got to Juilliard, my undergrad, I didn't know how to practice. I just went to the practice room and I practiced. And David Carroll just said, as you get older, you have less and less time to practice. So I'm going to teach you how to be efficient. And he assigned me so much music a week. And he said to me, my first lesson, he said, you will take one day off from the bassoon every week. He's like, and I'm going to ask you what day it was and what you did. And so I had 6 days to get all this music done. And he really would say, practice, three lines a day. You have 20 minutes, make it work. So it really made me focus. Like, okay, I would look at an etude and it's 20 lines of music and I have to have it perfected next week, how to break that down. And I kept a journal and he wanted to see my journal of how I practiced. And so I do that with my students from their first lesson as a freshman this is what I expect next week. How are we going to get this done? And I really break it up. And basically I feel that with my own practicing is every day, if it's a new piece, I want something in the can where even if it's a measure, like something of that piece is done and I can pretty much put it away. Or it's woodshedded. And I do that with students. And I think that kind of helps. I don't know if it helps motivate them, but I think it helps them get through the music. And, because as we know, if you practice a whole etude, like it's 20 minutes, what do you remember? But if you practice one line for 20 minutes, you remember a lot. You might even have it memorized. So I try to put short-term goals with them. And in that taking a day off from the bassoon, I still do that. Like I still take time off the bassoon. I think that is super, super healthy. It was very healthy for me at Juilliard to have a day where I don't think the bassoon.
Does that help with burnout?
It helps me with burnout. Yeah. My whole life, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I almost always take summers off. I'll do IDRS or like a summer, but I really, I need time away from what I do. And so summer for me, I always make sure I have good reads, at the end of the summer. So when I come back, a month or two later is I know I have good reads. And honestly, I think it's really easy to come back to bassoon. I feel like by the end of an hour or two, I don't feel like I've taken any time off at all. I can't play as long, but otherwise everything's there.
Yeah, I think that's really good and important to talk about. Like you said, oh, maybe I shouldn't say it out loud. Like I feel like we're not honest enough
Yeah.
about the time off that we do take. Like, we feel like we have to put on these airs and in, the time of coronavirus and quarantine, there have been times that I've lacked inspiration and just have found myself not practicing for more significant periods of time than I would ever typically admit. And then I'll have a
Hmm.
colleague or a friend mention like, oh gosh, I took all of April off, or oh man, I've been struggling. I haven't really been practicing during this time. And it was so like affirming to me to hear like, oh my God, it's almost like permission of like, oh, I'm allowed to have an ebb and flow relationship. And,
Hmm.
of course, there's a professionalism of being prepared, but there's also like acknowledging our humanity and not just like this perfect robotic, I am always my best self, and that there's never a case where that's not. And so even just saying like, as an established professional, you have a healthy relationship where you will take the summers to be a human is, I
Hmm.
think, really important to say.
Well, and so it was my partner of 18 years. We actually got married this summer. So it's weird to say my husband, but my husband, um,
Congratulations.
oh, thank you. Yeah, it was really, the time was right. Um, but we've always lived for 14 years of this 18 years, we lived apart. And so I always, for 14 years, this is my 15th year, have been at Arizona, and we had a house, our primary house in Phoenix, but we had a place in California where he worked and lived, and then it was Connecticut and Maine and New York City. And so, the summers were the only time we could be a real family with the dogs and all be together. And so it was just natural, in my professional teaching is I just wanted to chill and be with him and do fun things and not have bassoon be part of that. So it was nice that way too.
Yeah.
I'm so inspired hearing that because I there was a 14-month period where my wife worked in Michigan and I worked in Mississippi, and it was a
Hmm.
really hard time. So the fact that you have done it for 14 out of 18 years,
Hmm.
that's you're so strong.
Well, and I think part of it was, I mean, it was really healthy too because it made me with my job is when I would be with him with the weekend or when he came out to Phoenix for the weekend is we didn't do any job. It was we just spent time together, and so I just the bassoon didn't exist that weekend. And the thing is, you can do that if you plan properly and build that in. So, and I would know, like, okay, so Greg's coming into town this week, and so I got to really get my butt in gear and get everything ready so I can take the weekend off. And again, that goes back to David Carroll at Juilliard. Just you got 6 days to get all this done, and I want to know what you did on your day off. So it takes planning is what it does. And if anybody who is listening out there knows Albie Micklich, my middle name is Planner. So, I'm good at planning.
That is fantastic. And I love the idea of planning for a break because so often, like Jackie said, we feel guilt and shame
Hmm.
for taking a break. And maybe speaking for myself, maybe if I planned for a break, then I wouldn't have to take a deep dive into that emotional spiral.
Yeah, I had a teacher who called it the beckoning piano. And that there was always just this voice on her shoulder
Yeah.
saying, you should be you could be, you should be,
Yeah.
all of this type of thing. So yeah,
But instead, get real and just do it or don't do it.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I want to back up a little bit actually and go back to when you were graduating from Michigan State and embarking on your career in higher education. And
Hmm.
I'd love for you to talk us through how you ended up at one of the largest schools of music in the country.
So I was at Michigan State and I did 2 years on campus, and then I applied for University of Missouri Columbia, and I got that job. That was my first audition interview, and I got that, and I wasn't finished at Michigan State, and Mizzou wrote into my contract that I had to be completely done by August 1st of the next year. Um, so University of Missouri was my first non-sabbatical job, and I had to do my comprehensive exams and my DMA document. And so it was extremely stressful year because I knew I didn't have a job if I didn't finish the DMA. And so I don't recommend that for anybody. I probably wouldn't do that again. But so I love Mizzou. I felt I wasn't quite the right fit for that university. And 2 years later, the University of Nebraska opened up, and I went to that interview, and I just loved it. I just thought, oh, it was in a bigger city, and the universities, in the downtown, and coming from a small town, I just like the energy of a bigger city, and I thought
Mhm.
I like Lincoln, Nebraska a lot. And I was very, very, very happy there. I met my partner, Greg, there. He was at Creighton University. And so we thought we probably aren't going to live in Nebraska our whole lives. And so I remember it was a spring break. And we talked about where, like, he would have to follow me, which, has taken 14 years or 18 years. And now he actually lives in Arizona full time. Follow me, and where do we want that to be? And as a lot of the listeners know, the big schools and in the big or the schools in the big cities, a lot of it is adjunct teachers, and I knew I had a handful of universities that I could teach at and be in a big city, and I I had a friend who was from the desert and visited him in Tucson, and first time I came out to the Southwest, I just fell in love. I felt like I should have been born a desert rat. I loved it. And I said to Greg, I said, the one job that I want is Arizona State University. I said, it is big city, it's the desert, it's our only shot to live in the desert in a big city. And literally 3 days later, the job posted.
Stop.
Yeah, no, it's a true story. And I wasn't even looking. I was very happy at Nebraska, but I thought, well, I guess, we need to start looking at, where we want to, live and retire. And, Jeff Lyman was leaving the school, went to Michigan, and I didn't have my resume or anything ready. And I just I called Greg and I said, listen, this is it. And he's like, okay, we got to get this job. And, yeah, I still pinch myself. I can't believe I'm here. And I just, I'm so happy at Arizona State. I mean, it's a great school of music and colleagues. And the desert's not for everybody. We've had over almost 40 days of 110 degrees this summer. It's not for everybody, but man, come out in the winter and, it's pretty hard not to love Phoenix in the winter or Tempe in the winter. And so that's how I ended up at Arizona State.
First of all, I would like to say how much I love that you said that your partner said, "We have to get that job."
I was gonna say, Greg sounds awesome.
Oh, it was a team effort. And I mean, and the negotiating, he's like, okay, this is what you're going to do to negotiate. And so, and I exceeded like, and he's the money finance guy in this relationship. I can't even spell finance. And, so I exceeded his expectations. So that, I was really happy about that.
Good job, Greg.
Yeah. I mean, I just applied for tenure at my university, and that was definitely a team effort.
Oh,
it takes a village.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so nice when you get that in, right? Like, it's just a huge relief when you get your dossier and everything submitted.
So, on the flip side of getting the job.
Hmm.
You seem to be extremely successful at winning higher ed positions, and I'm sure that you are experienced on the other end
Hmm.
of the committee side where you are looking to hire somebody. So I would love to hear your perspective of what you look for in a candidate and what makes somebody stand out in your mind.
Yeah, and I shouldn't say this because if my boss hears it, I could be in trouble. But I love being on search committees, and so I do. I was on a music theory search committee last year, and I'm not a theory person at all, but I love reading their research, and I love talking to them on the phone and getting to know them. And so what I look for is, well, first of all, for those looking for higher ed job, is the application itself is, only submit what they want. If they aren't calling for recordings, don't submit recordings. Like, you have to show that you can follow the rules and follow instructions. I mean, you have to show from your application you're going to be a good colleague, and give us what we want. And so I'm the stickler for that. Like, oh, well, this person didn't submit this, or they missed it by 3 days. I'm the stickler with that, because I feel that is reflective once you're on campus and have the job. That's reflective of who you really are.
Mhm.
But again, for the younger folks out there that want to go into university, and as you both know, is university interview is hard. I mean, you show up and you are on the minute somebody picks you up at the airport until the minute they put you on that plane. I mean, you have to be on for days. And it's the search committee interview, and it's lunch and dinner and breakfast, and it's the recital and the teaching. And I had to do a theory class once, and so it's a lot of work. And with being on search committees is, there's never anybody that is number one in absolutely everything. I mean, so this person rises to top here and this person there. And so it really comes down to who's a good fit for the university. Like, who's
Mhm.
going to be, the best overall candidate. And for performance jobs is, it really comes down, a lot of it is the recital. Like, the make or the break is the recital. I mean, they need to know that you can play, but you also have to have a good interview and um, good teaching. And I mean, if I remember going to the director of the School of Music at Michigan State when I had the Mizzou job and said, "Can you ask me questions?" And he was throwing questions out. I didn't have any idea how to answer. Like, what are your recruiting strategies? I'm like, recruiting strategies? I don't know. I'm a college kid. And so, have people sit down. And I think now colleges, I know at ASU, we do a much better job getting our DMA students ready for interviews, but I didn't have any of that.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off that, one thing I was curious about is, you have a large and I would assume diverse studio that
Mhm.
spans undergraduates and masters and doctorate. And pedagogically, how do you approach, being able to make your teaching really relevant to all of those different levels? And then also common time, like studio class or read class, and finding a common ground between such a large, diverse group.
Yeah, well, that's what I love, is that I do have undergrad, master's, and doctorate, and it's pretty much a 50-50 split. And so what I love is, my freshmen are hearing the DMA students playing, our hardest rep. And like, they always have aspirational peers, in the studio. And as far as the DMA in studio is, we do peer teaching. So then my graduate students are now teaching the undergrads, the beginning reps. And in those classes is, we're not, as the studio members, we're not evaluating the performer, we're evaluating the teacher. And much like we do for college jobs. And so, and I'll just say to the student, like, listen, you have 15 minutes with the student when you interview for a job. When they play, you gotta know, like, you got to make a difference. Like, where are your magic tricks? Like, you got to make a big difference. So when that student stops playing, what can you fix and what can the committee fix? And so I think that's really good for everybody, for the undergrads to be working with the grad students and getting feedback from me. Um, as far as reads go, I pushed for about 12 years at Arizona State to get real classes. Because as you know, we do all this work and don't get any credit, and the students don't get credit. And you know, their lesson grade suffers because they don't have a good read. And it's so I wanted, you know, your lesson is your lesson, your read is your read grade. And so I pushed, and I finally have actual classes the students have to take. They have to, everybody has to take a minimum 2 semesters of read class. Then we take reads completely out of the lesson, and it's a class, and it's grouped with freshmen, and then I teach undergrad and then grad. And so everybody's on different levels. And even with the grad students is, you know, I teach them the Albie Micklich style, but if they're happy with their reads and I'm happy with their reads, is they don't have to, their reads don't have to look like mine, but they have to be able to do everything they need to do. They need good tone, good pitch, good articulation. But you know, undergrads is, you know, their reads have to look like mine, and I have a read rubric of like 26 steps. You know, so when they submit a blank, if one step is wrong, that blank, I keep the blank and they get 0 points. So I teach consistency from day one with read making. And they know I've got a whole thing here. I could show you all this jar of read blanks I have, and sometimes the wire's you know, a millimeter in the wrong place. I keep the blank, they get 0 points. So they learn very quickly, you know, how to be consistent with reads, because we don't have extra time. We don't have extra time to fool around with making reads.
You are giving me ideas.
So the read class is actually a part of their degree plan.
Yeah, so it's even the music ed majors have, I think, 4 free credits of electives. So they have to do 2. I require 2 read making classes, and they're each 1 credit. So 2 of those electives I take, and then they can, you know, have fun with 2 other.
Awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah, and it's great. It really, and again, then it's just they have a read grade and a lesson grade, because you know, I always, you know, a student comes in prepared, and you know they know their stuff, but their read or their best read crack, and they don't have anything, and now I'm penalizing the lesson grade because, you know, their best read crack. Well, we've all had that happen. So yeah, it works really well. I'm really happy about that.
This line of work, whether it's teaching or performing, can suck up all of your time. And I know that you mentioned that you take time off regularly, but we are in such a strange new world now with online everything that it seems to seep into all aspects of our lives and every hour of our day. So I would love to hear your perspective on time management and work-life balance.
Yeah, you know, so I talked a little bit about, you know, living in separate homes for 14 of 18 years. And so it goes back to planning again. And, you know, we've always had dogs. And so I schedule block times at ASU. And when I don't have to be at ASU, I am home, you know, feeding the dogs, letting the dogs out. And so my students know when I'm going to be on campus and when I'm not. And when I'm not, and I live, you know, it's a half hour. It's not far, but with traffic, it's a half hour. So they know, like, if they need me, they've got hours when I'm available and other times when I'm not available. And so that's part of the work balance. Also, again, I'm a planner. I take a lot of time for physical and mental health. And so my entire life I've been a morning person. I get up, I was up today at 4:30 to go running.
Oh,
and so, well, in Phoenix, you kind of have to in the summer. And so I, you know, either in running or not now in the pandemic, either running or at the gym first thing in the morning, and then I get home and get ready for school, and you know, then I'm done with physical activity for the day, and then it's Bassoon. But when I leave campus, you know, then it's I'm done for the day. Like the job is the job is over. I do all my practicing at home. But as far as, once I leave campus, is ASU teaching is done for the day.
So boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes the students, I mean, they may need something, and so I'll say, you can come to me, you can come to my house, and I'll help you out. And it may mean they have to Uber or they have to take the light rail, and it takes them an hour for public transportation to get to my house. And I will give my students as much time as they want and need, but it may mean they have to put the effort to come to me because I'm no longer in the office.
I love that.
Yeah, this family is definitely a pro dog family. So yeah.
Well, and that's it's great having a dog because I can just say, sorry, I can't teach you. I have to be home for the dogs. And I mean, you know it. You've got to be home for the dogs. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a choice. So this is when I'm in my office. Like if you need to borrow read equipment, this is when you do it.
Mm-hmm. You have a very rich resume of recording projects, especially your 2017 release Cantando. And I'd love to hear about your experiences in recording and selecting repertoire and what projects appeal to you and why and that type of thing.
Yeah, so the dirty secret is it is my least favorite thing on the planet to record. I don't like editing. I don't like the whole process. And so what my philosophy is, I really approach recording is as a live performance. So when I walk into the recording studio I know the piece as good as it's going to be. I try to just run it 2 or 3 times and that's it. And we piece it together. I can't do the measure by measure by measure. To me, it's no longer a recording, it's a puzzle. And so I really, on that CD, the Steinmetz Sonata, I think every movement was just from 2 takes. I mean, it was just run it once, run it again, that's it. So I try to be really prepared for recording so that I don't have to be in there all day. As far as rep, I try to bring new rep that I love, obviously, and just new rep that people aren't familiar with, and just fun things, stuff that that everybody in the studio can play something from that latest CD. So there's always, and even recitals that I program, there's everybody in my studio can play something on my recital. I never do this crazy hard recital because then the undergrads, what if they can't pick a piece and say, I want to do the Boutry on my junior recital, because they probably aren't going to be able to do the Boutry on their junior recital.
Right.
Would you share with us a favorite memory of a past performance?
Yeah. So when I was at Juilliard, they had a concerto competition, and the way it works is it rotates. So every X amount of years is the bassoon competition. And my last year, it was the bassoon competition, and they picked the concerto. It was Ellen Zwillich's bassoon concerto, and I think Nancy was the only one that had played it. So I think I might have been the second performer, maybe it might have been the third. And so I auditioned for that, and I won it, and it was in Avery Fisher Hall, and Ellen Zwillich was in the audience, and John Corigliano was in the audience, and I was in the dressing rooms that the biggest soloists in the world are in, and there was an elevator that took me right down to the stage, and I had a person to get me there and food in the dressing room, and I felt like a bassoon celebrity for 15 minutes, and that performance, I mean, just walking out on Avery Fisher Hall and playing Ellen Zwillich's concerto with Ellen Zwillich in the audience, and David Carroll got me into the hall, Avery Fisher, to try it out. He was sneaking me in. He knew when there was a half-hour block, and I remember he's sneaking me in, and Michiko Uchida, the great Japanese pianist, was playing a concerto, and she was trying out all the Steinways, and she saw us, and she knew David from the symphony, and he just said, "Oh, my student won a concerto. He's nervous. He wants to try out the hall." And she was so gracious. She closed up the pianos and moved them off the stage, and she sat out in the audience and like listened, and she was helping me pick my reed and all of that. But yeah, that performance stands out over anything. So, and so many of my friends and family came, and they'd never been to New York City, some of them, and now they're in Avery Fisher Hall. So it was a great performance. I mean, it was a great memory. I don't know if it was a great performance, but it was a great memory.
I'd love to hear a bit about your reed making process and setup, from the nitty gritty of like, the dorky stuff, like what shape you use and your process a little bit. And then also like maybe reed making habits or routines and general advice for how you approach that.
Yeah, again, it was, so I learned reeds with my undergrad bassoon professor, Dr. Borsten. It was his style, and he was great, but he would always finish my reed, like take it and turn away and fix it. And so I got to Juilliard and couldn't really finish a reed. And David Carroll he was just again said, we don't have extra time for reed, so we're going to be super consistent. So he taught me consistency. And so I start with gouged cane, and I get it from Bill Woodward. I love Madeira cane, and he hardness tests his cane. So you don't throw away a whole lot of cane if you get it from custom cane. And I have hardness testers here. And so basically, if once I have that piece of cane and I'm committing to make a blank, I am convinced it's going to be a good reed, because I know how hard it is. I have a flex tester, so I know the flexibility. And I use a Fox 1 and a 2 shape, which I then narrow. I play on skinny little reeds. But it's all about consistency. And honestly, out of 10 blanks, unless I do I split it or do something awful with my scraping, is 8 of those blanks are going to be played in public in some form. And it's really all about consistency. And I use a wood burner on all my reeds, what the cane is, when I made the blank, how hard, what the flexibility is. But the thing is, I hate making reeds. I loathe it. I don't like anything like the fine motor skills with your hands. I just don't like that. And so when I make a blank, it's going to be a good reed because it's consistent and I know exactly what it should be.
What is your advice to young people who aspire to have a career like yours?
Practice. You have to. Well, you guys know your colleagues, like my colleagues. I just feel, the people at ASU and my WIN colleagues in string and all the performances. I didn't go to school with any of them, but I feel they were probably near the top in their studios at their schools, and that's the level for college teaching. I mean, the competition is fierce now. I mean, it's really fierce. You've got to be really dedicated. I feel at some point in your life you have to live, breathe, and die your instrument. And mine was, well, undergrad through Juilliard. Like I practiced all the time. But yeah, you have to be dedicated and have passion. I mean, if you think like, oh, maybe I want to be a college professor, you don't want to be. I mean, you've got to have the drive and passion and want to do it.
Albie, this was such a wonderful conversation. We gained so much from your stories and your perspective, and we're so thrilled that you took the time to speak with us and our listeners on Double Reed Dish. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, this has been such a joy. I love the podcast, and I'm just so glad you contacted me.
Team Greg.
Team Greg.
We hope you enjoyed that spooky, ooky episode of Double Reed Dish. And that you'll follow us, please, on social media, and that you also won't forget to rate and review us on iTunes, and that you will make sure to turn in for the next episode. Galit, who is that going to feature?
Our next episode features an incredible talk with Titus Underwood, principal oboe of the Nashville Symphony Orchestra. Jackie, we gotta end this nerd parade.
Go McReese!